Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. This is your boy, Dr. J.C. Dornick, aka The Dragon. And this is another episode of the Make Sense with Dr. J.C. podcast. And this is our special live edition where we review books, fantastic books like this one on Mondays. So in the live format, as people figure this out, I want to apologize. When I set this up, I was in a different time zone. So the advertised live, I lied to you. It says that it's at 9 because of the Central Standard Time. So either way, whether people figure it out and come here live or not, this is where it's going to sit until it gets edited and things like that. So great morning, everybody. Great morning, world. Just got back from Chicago at this event called Creative Con, and it was just delightful. It was awesome. It was just so awesome to be in an environment full of dreamers and what we call creatives that are just trying to figure out how to take those ideas and, deliver them to the masses, make an impact, and also make money doing it. So it was a great event. So let's get right into this. I want to not dilly-dally on this because we're starting a little bit late. As a quick reminder, these live editions, it gives you the ability to comment and ask questions. It's not going to end up probably, unless it's something really, really cool, it's not going to end up on the podcast version. The podcast version will be cleaned up and edited in a much shorter fashion. But love interacting with people, and very often you guys ask questions that stimulate some really cool stuff that ends up coming into the fold. So we are going to make sense of suffering today, one of my favorite topics, and I'm going to encourage you to make it a favorite topic of yours too, because it's something that seems to happen quite often. So we're going to make sense of suffering, and we're going to do a little bit of a summary, meaning give the highlights, the biggest takeaways, the biggest lessons, incorporate it into the interface response system. We're going to make sense of this amazing book that is just such a small, easy read, as many of his books are. But this one is called No Mud, No Lotus. And that is by the infamous Thich, Nhat. I would love to have somebody approach me that claims to know the exact pronunciation of this guy's name, because sometimes it's just like, but I read it as Thich, not Hanh. I've never met him, so I've never had him correct me or anything like that. Great morning, Kathy. Good to see you. Kathy figured it out. All right, so this is going to be a book summary on this amazing, amazing book. And it gives you the ability. By no means is this your opportunity to, get rid of reading the book. This is like a book that I think everybody should just devour and read it over and over and over again. Like I said, it's a teeny little simple book. And there's no way I can really, really do it justice. But the idea of these Mondays is that if I can take this book and in about 20 minutes, give you the highlights and give you some distinctions and make sense of it, it's going to greatly enrich your week. So enjoy. Here's a quote. Let's open up with a quote from the man. He says, "Most people are afraid of suffering, but suffering is a kind of mud to help the lotus flower of happiness grow." So we know, we're going to get into it, but we know that the lotus, one of the most beautiful flowers in the world, actually grows in some of the stinkiest, smelliest mud. So it's just such an interesting parallel and metaphor for us. But he's referring to the fact that the lotus flower of happiness grows. And this is how you can interpret it into your life. I see some people coming into the live now, so they're figuring it out. Once again, I'm so sorry that my other live projection was advertised as being an hour later, but that's because I set it up in a different time zone. Hey, side note, just for those of you that watch this, the live stream or the recorded of the live stream, very, very excited. We've got some amazing, amazing guests coming. We've got the amazing Dr. Bolt Taylor, Jill Bolt Taylor, who's a neuroanatomist, and she's actually the first viral TED Talk video that ever went viral. So look her up on TED, and she wrote a book called Whole Brain Living, and it's just amazing. So she's coming. And then one of my all-time greatest idols that I just am so shocked and just honored that I've got this guy coming on the show. I guess we're doing something right. That would be the author of one of my top 5 greatest books, most impactful books that I've already reviewed with you guys. And that would be The Big Leap. And that's the author known as Gay Hendricks is going to be on the podcast, which is like, I'm going to get my shit together for those two. So what is suffering, right? And what if suffering was not the enemy? What if the very thing that we resist, and we've been programmed and trained to resist, the hardship that we curse, the adversity that we run from, what if it was the catalyst for everything that we desire? And I know we play with this idea, but what if it was true and you knew it to be true? What would you do with that information? So reading this book teaches you that the truth is we don't get the reward without the challenge. That's the obvious thing that we can see, right? No mud, no lotus. So if you're in the market and desire a lotus, you have to have some mud. We don't get wisdom without failure, strength without struggle, growth without pain. Everything worth having in life inconveniently, mysteriously, but inconveniently sits on the other side of discomfort. And yet, most people spend their lives trying to sidestep that primary main ingredient, waiting for a smoother road, hoping that the obstacles will just simply disappear before they begin the journey. Get ready to get ready. Now, just self-reflect on yourself for a second and just see how that's showing up in your life. One of those ideas of, I know that failure and tragedy and all of the mud is part of everyone's successful journey towards bliss and happiness and money and all of that stuff. But I'd kind of hope that it's not the case with me. Do you ever get that feeling? But hope on its own is a sucker's game. I have a blog coming out called Hope is for Suckers. So I'll say that again. Hope on its own is a sucker's game. It implies waiting, postponing life, and deferring action in favor of some imagined future where everything aligns perfectly. That would make you a sucker. That's not how it works. And that's not how it works. The lotus does not bloom in clear, pristine water. So if you're waiting for clear, pristine water, no lotus. It rises from filth, from the thick, suffocating mud, smelly, suffocating mud. The very conditions that you resist are the ones that shape us into who we were meant to become. Do you believe in that? Do you believe in that? It doesn't matter if you believe in it or not. It's one of those things that just is. But what do you think about it? So Thich Nhat Hanh's No Mud, No Lotus is a meditation on suffering, a call to embrace the messiness of life rather than resist it. He does not tell us to avoid pain, nor does he romanticize it. Instead, what he does is he teaches us that suffering and happiness are interdependent on one another. This is so fascinating. Kathy believes it. They're interdependent on one another. One cannot exist without the other. That's what's so fascinating about acknowledging both sides of something. If the thing that you want is at the top of your list of desires, it comes with the other. So if you notice that the other is not happening, it just means you're not on your way to the thing. We cannot cultivate resilience, wisdom, or inner peace without first encountering the discomfort that forces us to develop those qualities. So let's talk a little bit about this amazing author. Thich Nhat Hanh was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, peace activist, and poet, widely regarded as one of the most influential spiritual leaders of our time. How'd you like that? How'd you like that on your resume? I'm one of the, most influential people of our time. I love that idea. So he was a pioneer and engaged in Buddhism. He was one of those figures that came out and helped a lot of people understand what Buddhism was, bringing mindfulness into everyday life and demonstrating how spiritual practice is not a retreat from the world, but an invitation to engage with it more deeply. Exiled from his home country, I just find like anybody that's like a serious Buddhist has like been exiled. Haven't you been exiled from something? Maybe not a country. I know some people that have, but it just seems like these amazing sages that are just making just world changing impact, went through so much struggle. So exiled from his home country for advocating peace during the Vietnam War. How dare you advocate peace during the Vietnam War? He spent decades traveling, teaching, and writing, offering profound yet accessible wisdom. Profound yet accessible. I'd like to think that the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast provides profound yet accessible and sensible, right, wisdom to those that seek inner peace in a chaotic world. So his books, including obviously No Mud, No Lotus, The Miracle of Mindness, I've read them all and they're all amazing. Peace in Every Step, and the one we're going to do today, No Mud, No Lotus, have touched millions of people, weaving Buddhist philosophy with practical insights from modern life. He spoke not just to monks and spiritual seekers, but to anyone that would listen. Anyone who has ever suffered, longed for peace, or wondered how to navigate these inevitable hardships. Is that you? I feel like I'm talking to humans, right? And has anyone here made it this far without suffering? Are you suffering right now and trying to navigate that? Well, this episode's going to be for you. So let's talk about this art of transforming suffering. This is all about making a new relationship today and having a new understanding of that relationship with suffering. So at the heart of No Mud, No Lotus is the idea that suffering is not only an obstacle. So what's interesting is the Stoics say that the obstacle is the way, but it's still calling it an obstacle. See, in Buddhism, they don't even look at obstacles as obstacles. They understand that it's very often the way, but they're omnipresent with whatever else you're seeking. So they don't look at it as an obstacle. But it's not only an obstacle, but suffering is also an opportunity. So take note of that. Suffering is not only an obstacle. You're going to look at it either one of these ways or both, but it's also an opportunity. Thich Nhat Hanh shows us that often shows us how we often look at things one way and miss the other. So for example, I love this. If you watch some of his videos in his lectures, what he used to do is he used to pick up a piece of paper and remind us that the paper has two sides. He says there's a left side of the paper and a right side. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, I know that you know there's two sides. And he points out, though, that we can't remove the left side from the right and vice versa. However, anytime you grab a piece of paper, just as I've done right here, I have some notes here. I've only used one side. I don't have anything on the other side. Isn't that interesting? But we typically choose to write only on one side. So he points out the same thing within the negative experience of suffering. And he lays down the fact that, the raw material of suffering is actually the place which growth and beauty emerge. So he looks at suffering as like raw material and fertilizer for growth and bliss and happiness. That's where they emerge from. What an interesting way to look at suffering or mud. Most people spend their lives either avoiding suffering or drowning in it. We distract ourselves with work, entertainment, overeating, and mindless scrolling. That's a big one these days. Numbing the discomfort of the truth of what's going on rather than facing it. The easy way out, cut the corner. Others allow suffering to define them. That's another thing, is to actually identify yourself as a victim and suffering, carrying it like a badge of honor, as if their pain is proof of some deep injustice in the world and they're right about it. Neither approach leads to liberation, if that's what you're into. What Thich Nhat Hanh suggests instead is radical acceptance. We talk a lot about that. Radical responsibility, radical acceptance of what is, radical curiosity, radical use of the word maybe, and saying things like, I don't know, which is the truth. Radical acceptance of the present moment. Rather than running from or resisting suffering, we must sit with it. You don't have to face it and fight it. He's just saying sit with it and observe it and allow it to teach us. Now, that's a big distinction right there. He refers to suffering as a teacher. Now, we all know what's the lesson in it. We try to find the lesson in things, but he looks at suffering as a teacher. He explains that true happiness is not the absence of suffering, but the ability to develop a productive relationship with it and transform it. So that's what you're looking to do, is how you look at suffering right now, shape it and mold it into something else. We're going to transform it by creating a different understanding and relationship of it. Mindfulness here is the key. When we bring this awareness to our suffering, we loosen its grip. Instead of being consumed by it, we begin to understand it. It's part of it. If you enjoy eating your dinner tonight, think about all of the recipe ingredients that went into it. Because if you get what you want, it's going to be on the other side of some suffering. So we're entertaining the idea that suffering is not a bad thing here. It's just a thing. And in understanding it, we create the possibility for transformation. It's a simple truth, yet profoundly difficult to embody. The more we try to escape pain, the more it owns us. Isn't that true? The only way out is through. That's another big, big takeaway. The only way out of suffering is radical acceptance and going through it. Here's a quote from Eckhart Tolle, who speaks a lot about suffering. All of these things will be in the description and the transcript when you get the podcast. And maybe we'll throw that up. Here's Eckhart Tolle. He says, it may look like the situation is creating the suffering, but ultimately this is not so. Your resistance is. So Eckhart Tolle is saying your relationship and your resistance to suffering is where the suffering is created. So here's some good shift right here that I got from this book. I've read this book many, many times. Ever notice how everything that you want is just positioned inconveniently? I said it before, but now we're going to put it in my terms. Inconveniently, everything that we desire, God and the universe has placed it right behind a big pile of, once again, smelly shit, or poopy for those that don't like swears. It's almost comical. Have you ever looked at what it is that you want and the obstacle course that is sitting in between you and it, and all the things that you not only dislike, but the worst ones are always sitting in front of you. So it's natural that you hope that the thing will come to you, like we'll hope and pray for it. We'll have faith that, believe in ourselves and wait for the right timing and stuff like that. No, you have to become a shit navigator, right? So do you want financial freedom? Get ready for rejection, failure, and years of grinding with no guarantees. And that's not a bad thing. If you're experiencing failure and rejection and setbacks and letdowns and no return on investment, all of those things, that's part of it. That's totally normal. And it doesn't justify quitting. Do you want deep, meaningful relationships? Well, then prepare for heartbreak, vulnerability, and uncomfortable conversations. Relationship people, People that have a wonderful, loving relationship, like I consider myself, isn't that true? How do we build a muscle, right? We break it down, we destroy it, and it gets strong and beautiful. So, do you want mental strength? Well, that comes with struggle, self doubt, and hard lessons. It's interesting, just a thought that comes to mind right now, how we live in a society that looks to eradicate symptoms. This is what medicine is for. You get a headache, you get a fever. We're always looking to get rid of discomfort. We never sit with it. We never sit with it and learn with it. We never acknowledge it, how it's happening for us. We always look to eradicate. One of the things that I love to do is meet really mean, like inappropriate people. I don't feel like I have to be a victim to anybody. I'm fascinated with it because I know that it's part of the balance of the ecosystem. So it's as if the universe designed the entire experience that we're having to ensure that only those willing to endure the process can claim the prize. The lotus grows only in the mud. You cannot find another way to grow a lotus. You can hydroponic it, but you still need the mud. I often remind myself of an old joke, and I say this all the time. With all this shit, there's got to be a pony somewhere. So it's crude, but very, very accurate if you think about it. And it's an accurate way of saying that every pile of adversity hides something valuable, doesn't it? The problem is that most people never bother to dig through it. Are you willing to dig through it? Or are you going to wait for the fog to pass? Because once the fog passes, you'll notice that the prize is no longer there. It's been offered to somebody else. So if you're in the fog right now, in the mud, that's an opportunity. Remember, we said there was not just an obstacle, it was an opportunity. But what if the difficulty is proof that you're exactly where you need to be? So let's talk about navigating the shit, the mud, right? And let's correlate it to the interface response system. So I just want to pause right here and just remind everybody, whenever you learn something new, try to do your best to relate it to some of your core principles and your systems and your strategies. So I have something that I teach everybody in the Make Sense Academy, this thing called the interface response system. So I like to take anything I learn and run it through my system and see where it's relevant. So that's what I'm going to do with you right now. And that helps you make sense of things. And when you make sense of things, you gain clarity. Remember, confusion paralyzes us, clarity sets us free. So our sponsor of this podcast, the Make Sense Academy, is a psychological safe haven and an environment full of just amazing people that actually openly tell me they don't want to refer anybody because they don't want anyone else to find out about it, because they want to hide it from other people. And when they hear that, they laugh. But the truth is it's for everybody. I'm on a mission to take this information and everything that I've ever created and bring people to this conversation. We like to call it the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. And we make it something that anybody can afford. So just imagine getting business coaching, all of the tools and strategies for financial freedom, but all of the headspace, learn the interface response system, collaborate and connect with all sorts of like-minded, open and curious people. Well, that's the Make Sense Academy. And right now it's $48 a month, not $1,500. And you speak to somebody for 1 hour a week. We're meeting every day. So let's navigate through the shit, the mud. So the philosophy aligns seamlessly, as everything does, with the interface response system, the 4-step framework that I use to approach challenges with intention rather than reaction. That's the purpose of the 4-step interface response system. So in the interface response system, the first step, which we refer to as perceive, there's 4 P's: perceive, pause, process, and then proceed. So the first step, perceive, and what we do in that is that's where we're going to recognize the reality of what we're facing without judgment. Without judgment, just observe it. Remember, your brain thinks, your heart beats. You don't have to have an opinion. You don't have to participate in it. Just observe it. Instead of immediately categorizing an experience as good or bad, we're just going to simply categorize it as an experience. This is the practice of mindfulness that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about. And Another really, really cool reference of that is Dr. Bruce Perry, who co-authored a book with Oprah Winfrey called What Happened to You, which is next week's book, by the way. He calls it brain awareness perception. And that is just the awareness of why your brain does what it does, and also the act of trying to capture it. Kathy says, very effective system. Got a lot of Kathy today. I like that. So the second step we call pause, and that's the cognitive distancing, pausing your program to hold space for what's happening without rushing to escape it. This is everybody's biggest challenge. And we pause by saying, huh. So whenever I read something from Thich Nhat Hanh, or you say something to me, or something happens in the world, I always greet it with, huh, which stands for haven't made up my mind yet, HMMM. I don't want to rush it. I don't want to try to escape it. I want to allow myself to look at it from multiple vantage points. So this is where most people fail. The egoic mind and its programmed stress response system jump into action. They panic, resist, or try to force their way out of discomfort, never allowing themselves the chance to truly understand what's actually unfolding in the present moment. We speak a lot about that. It's analogous to seeing a wave build up. You see a wave building up in the ocean, and your brain, you latch onto this idea and you never allow that wave to actually go through its whole process and crash out onto the shore and dissipate into the sand. So this pause creates the space to change the way that we typically look at things. So guess what? The things that we look at can begin to change. So without that pause, you're going to miss everything that Thich Nhat Hanh is saying. You're not going to openly and curiously entertain a different perspective of a different vantage point of suffering. So then comes step 3, process. So we're in the space and we're allowing ourselves to look at things from different vantage points. We're not needing to be right. We're being open and curious instead, which is going to save the world if we would do that. Process, the third step, where we look at these, where insight emerges. That's what it is. In this step, insight emerges. When we stop fighting against suffering, we start learning from it. We begin to see patterns, the lessons that are hidden in gifts buried in the adversity of suffering. You find the most beautiful flower in existence emerging in the smelliest mud. That's the lotus. You realize that within the mud lies the future flower. And when you see that beautiful flower in its pristine, visual, can you see the mud in the lotus as well? That's what's interesting. So whenever you see somebody and you're enamored by their lifestyle, you can't see the mud unless you consciously step into the space and see it. Whenever I meet somebody that's up on stage, just like me, like I just was, doing this amazing talk and sharing and trying to help people, I always wonder what their backstory is, because I know there's no way they got there without it. So finally, in step 4 of the interface response system, which we call proceed, we move forward with logic, rationale, and wisdom rather than impulse. If you can learn how to replace impulse, see, a lot of people are taught to go with their gut. And I understand why. I listen to my heart and my gut more than my brain, because my brain has been persuaded and programmed by outside forces. However, your gut and your heart can also act on impulse. So I go with my gut and heart, but I still wait and I create space. So we replace these things, right? We replace impulse with things like rationale and wisdom. Most people react to suffering blindly, either running from it or becoming imprisoned by it. When you begin the process of integrating those steps of the interface response system, you move through life with a deeper sense of purpose. Doesn't that sound nice? Unshaken by the inevitable mud along the way. You actually learn to get excited and enjoy the mud. I like to teach those that I mentor to look for the lotus in the mud. Look for the beauty in the mud. In modern day times, we can also refer to that lesson, as I said before, as feeling like we are working hard with no return. A lot of people say, what's the return on investment? If I put my time and effort in there, and I understand why we do that. We have urgency because we know we're not going to live forever. I don't want to waste my time. But at the same time, there's no guarantees of when the prize comes. We have to put the work in. So people begin losing hope and feeling like they're taking 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, right? So that's why people stay in this oscillating, getting ready to get ready pattern. So let's reframe struggle. So the next time that you find yourself maybe knee deep in adversity, ask yourself this: what if this is happening for me, not to me? Love that. What if this hardship is not punishment, but a refinement? What if this hardship is not punishment, but a refinement? What if instead of resisting, you leaned in and saw this thing, this suffering thing, as something that is shaping you into the person that you need to become? Remember, one of our tenets in the Make Sense Academy is that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. Okay. So if you find yourself doing, and getting nothing, right? You're not moving anywhere. There's a chance also that you're not the right person for the job right now. So that's what personal growth and self-development is. So what if you started looking at the muck and the mud and the suffering as something that is helping shape you into the person that will get the results that you desire so much? Life will never be free from suffering, my friends. That's not the goal. The goal, in fact, is to become the kind of person who can stand in the mud and recognize the lotus already growing under their feet. Because the truth is, or the potential truth, suffering is not the opposite of joy. It's the raw material from which joy is made. The two are inseparable, like the left and right side of a piece of paper. So my final thoughts: the lotus does not bloom in clear, pristine waters, right? It rises from the filth, from the thick, suffocating mud. Your challenges are not distractions from your desired path. They are the path. I envision stones. My challenges are the stones of the path. Your challenges are not distractions from your desired path. They are the path. Your struggle and suffering are the proving ground. The suck and the mud are your teacher. So if you find yourself once again in the thick of it, knee deep in the mess, remember, with all this shit, there's got to be a pony somewhere. Just like you'll find the shit in the pony, you'll learn to find the pony in the shit. Embrace the suck, my friends, and let the lotus grow. Allow it to grow. Make sense? So love and appreciate you all. And remember, if it makes sense to you, please share it. But if you learned something today, give it away. Don't take something that you think is pristine and helps you break through and keep it for yourself. The best part about it is give it away. So if you learn something today, give it away. It's in that practice that this information and this blessing will stay. Have a great time. I'll see you next time.